wonder, maybe there's a little bit of luck involved in getting in front of an audience. Some things that I know to credit how we've gotten here are taking advantage of our live show. That moment where you are in front of people, when you do find yourself in front of people, you have to make sure they don't forget.
I'm not one of those middle-aged white guy music snobs that insists that the best music was made 50 years ago. In fact, anytime someone tries to float that idea by me, I typically respond with something like, sure, if you don't count Julian Lage or Snarky Puppy or Esperanza Spalding or Thundercat or Domi and J.D. Beck or the Atlanta Space Quartet or Porcupine Tree or Mary Halverson or Ambrose Kinmasira or the Aristocrats. But just because I actively seek out and promote artists I love, regardless of their time period, even the new ones, that doesn't mean that I've kept up with current trends in music. My expertise in the pop and rock scenes is strictly limited to the time period between 1975 and 1988. I have made occasional efforts to keep up, but inevitably the conclusions I seem to come to is that the pop and rock scenes rely on shared emotional experiences from a specific demographic, one I've been excluded from for about 35 years now. That, and I haven't voluntarily listened to commercial radio since last century. That might be part of it. So I have almost no frame of reference for what I might be in for when listening to 21 Pilots for the first time, aside from what I just learned doing my research. And I actually learned a few interesting things, so here are the 5 things for 21 Pilots. First thing I was curious about was the band name. It turns out it comes from a play by Arthur Miller called All My Sons.
On January 29, 1947, Broadway saw the opening of a new play, All My Sons.
I listened to a performance of All My Sons the other day. It's set in 1946, post-World War II, and the central drama concerns a mom convinced that the older of her 2 sons, who was deployed overseas and has been missing for 3 years, is still alive. Meanwhile, the younger of her sons wants to marry his brother's old sweetheart. Mom finds out, drama ensues. In the ensuing arguments, the facts of a past secret comes to light. Turns out that the father, who owned a manufacturing plant, allowed faulty airplane parts to be shipped to the military during the war, and this resulted directly in the death of 21 pilots. So my guess is that Tyler Joseph had to read Arthur Miller for AP English in high school. Tyler Joseph is the songwriter and singer for 21 Pilots. He started making music while in high school in Columbus, Ohio, often with Nick Thomas, a friend who played guitar. In Ohio State, Tyler met Chris Saleh, and the two of them decided that they wanted to start a new band. They called Nick to play bass, and this trio was the original 21 Pilots. They toured a bit, released their first album, but both Chris and Nick decided that they were done in the spring of 2011. Chris had a friend named Josh Dunn, though, who worked at Guitar Center and was a decent drummer. And after rehearsing and gigging a bit, Tyler and Josh decided to try and continue 21 Pilots as a duo. A year later, they were signed to a subsidiary of Atlantic Records called Fueled by Ramen, the same label that had previously signed Paramore, Fall Out Boy, Jimmy Eat World, and Panic! At the Disco. Fueled by Ramen actually started in Gainesville, Florida by a U of F student. After their first successful release by Jimmy Eat World, they moved to Tampa, got themselves decent offices, and partnered with Warner Music Group's independent distribution service, ADA. Then after Panic! At the Disco's album, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, went quadruple platinum. See episode 39 of the albums I've missed for my take on that one. Fueled by Ramen became a huge player in the alt-rock scene. Fans of 21 Pilots called themselves the Skeleton Clique, or just the Clique, because of the kind of stylized skeleton figures that appear in a lot of the band's videos and stuff. These guys. And apparently, this has spawned something of its own artistic movement. There have been Skeleton Clique-related art exhibitions in several cities in the US and UK, including a display of over 100 panels covering the walls of the Wood Green Tube Station in London. But here's the thing I learned that's really going to blow your minds, my friends. In the history of the Billboard Hot 100, there have been only 3 artists who have had 2 songs in the top 5 at the same time. Only 3. And those 3 are Elvis, the Beatles, and 21 Pilots. And if that weren't mind-blowing enough for you, there's more. Since the beginning of the streaming age, The first time that every track on an album was certified as gold or better by the RIAA was this week's album, Blurryface. And in the entire history of the RIAA, only 21 Pilots have had every track on 2 consecutive albums go gold or better. Oh, and because of a promise that they made to each other in the early days, when 21 Pilots won the Grammy for Best Pop Duo/Group Performance, they accepted in their underwear.
This story, it starts in Columbus, Ohio.
And that's the 5 things for 21 Pilots. Time to give Blurryface a spin. Back soon with first impressions.
We would travel pretty close to home. We worked jobs Monday through Friday and would play shows on the weekend in and around Ohio. And as things started to get bigger slowly over time, we went further away from home.
I went in thinking I would hear something like Fall Out Boy or My Chemical Romance or Panic at the Disco, that kind of pop punk aesthetic with maybe some kitsch or camp thrown in. Kids these days are so disaffected, but that's not really what I'm hearing. For starters, the music of 21 Pilots is more synth heavy, but more like rave or techno or Depeche Mode synth, not 80s funk or Tangerine Dream or Keith Emerson synth. Not exclusively though. There is some guitar, some piano, and some ukulele. The album actually opens with Heavy Dirty Soul. Then the first thing you hear is the Amen break. If you will, let me take a minute to talk about this. In 1969, a soul band out of Washington, D.C. called the Winstons released a single called Color Him Father, a kind of soul story song in the same vein as Son of a Preacher Man or Patches.
Said I'm gonna color him father.
It won the Grammy for Best Rhythm and Blues Song that year. The B-side of Color Him Father was Amen Brother, an instrumental funk workup of the Amen chorus. Midway through the song, there's a 4-bar drum break played by drummer Gregory C. Coleman. I want you to remember that name for the rest of your life, because this 4-bar break, known in history as the Amen break, has become the most sampled piece of music in the 150-year-long saga of recordings to date. The Amen break has birthed entire genres of music. So anytime, anywhere you hear this break, remember the name Gregory C. Coleman, because despite the fact that music as we know it would not be the same without him, he received no compensation and no recognition for his contribution. So the least you can do is remember his name. Getting back to Heavy Dirty Soul, it's mostly a repetitive 4-chord loop over that Amen break groove. There's a breakdown with a measure of 5, and one bit at the end that kind of sets my teeth on edge, because Tyler sings a major third against a minor chord.
Inspires a rabbit.
Stressed Out is catchy enough, I guess. There's a clever little lyric thing at the top.
Wish I found some chords in an order that is new. I wish I didn't have to rhyme every time I sang.
When I had the album playing in the car, this is the one song my mom was okay with, so there's that. But I think I would like this song about 30% more if he didn't sing it good old days every single time. Next is Ride, which is the first song on the album with something of a reggae influence.
I know it's hard sometimes.
Though the 4-chord loop and the ravey synth still makes it feel more like it came primarily from a DJ. There's something about the cadence and the accent he uses in Fairly Local
Is that who I truly am? I truly don't have a chance.
that makes me think he's trying to do the Green Day thing, right? Of trying to sound British and working class when in fact he's from San Francisco. Well, Columbus, Ohio in this case. There's that, and there's also the excessive use of the oh in place of lyrics. So this might be my least favorite song on the album. Tear in My Heart is probably the closest to what I thought I was going to hear going in.
It's your life and have a soul.
Though even in a kind of dirt simple pop punk kind of a feel, they can't help but make it overly dance club bombastic. The Judge actually has some interesting things happening harmonically.
You're the judge. Oh no. Set me free.
Though it feels mostly like mid-aughts overly wrought indie rock, like maybe Arcade Fire or something. But at least it shows that they're capable of breaking out from the form of a 4-chord loop with a breakdown in the middle. Most of the second half of the album all kind of blends together for me. A lot of the same kinds of electro rave vibes with influences, some reggae thrown in from time to time. But there are a few things that had interesting moments. We Don't Believe What's on TV is kind of a quirky indie rock with ukulele thing that at times approaches Fountains of Wayne levels of whimsy. Most of Not Today feels similar to the rest of the album, though they do throw in a Beatles-style minor 4 right at the end. And last is Goner. And right from the very beginning I said, okay, this is them trying to be Radiohead. Yeah, you're just saying that because the time signature's 9/8 and there's swirly bits in the background. Emily hears Ben Folds 5.
I'm a goner. Somebody catch my breath.
Overall, I mean, the energy on Blurryface is pretty high and the songwriting is occasionally clever. Very occasionally. But generally, I don't know. I feel a bit weird about listening to this music. Like, have you ever been to a high school event, like a basketball game or an orchestra recital or something, and there's a middle-aged dude in the back of the auditorium watching everything way too closely, and you're like 90% sure that he's not supposed to be there, like he's not someone's father? Kind of like that. And those are my first impressions. Back soon with final thoughts.
But when I see someone with an egg profile picture, those people don't matter.
But my stance is that they do matter. And so do you. Vote for Josh John.
I have two conflicting final thoughts when it comes to Blurryface by 21 Pilots. On one hand, there is my personal interaction with the music itself, and that was, I'm sorry to say, mostly negative, but not entirely. There's a certain kind of predictability that comes from overuse of modern musical tropes, like 4-chord diatonic loops, millennial whoop style oh-oh-ohs in place of lyrics, and ravey and dubsteppy synth pads. After a minute, it's hard for me to stay engaged when it seems like each new element is just another cliche. But while I think most of the album follows these patterns, where I think 21 Pilots deserves at least some credit is that at least they combine the cliches in unique ways. Yes, the ukulele-fronted millennial indie rock sounds exactly like every bit of ukulele-fronted millennial indie rock you ever heard. And yes, the reggae-inspired dance house sounds exactly like all the reggae-inspired dance house you've ever heard. But it's not that often you hear them both in the same song, let alone the same album. So full credit to Tyler and Josh for at least having a broader palette of cliches than most. But honestly, I'm pretty uncomfortable saying even that much regarding my own feelings about the music of 21 Pilots. Because there was another, stronger reaction that I had to this music that only became more intense the more I listened. Look, the modern idea of popular music predates the technology to record music. The first million seller was sheet music.
A little maiden climbed an old man's knee.
But it doesn't predate it by much. Only in the 19th century did we start to have the infrastructure to disseminate cultural ideas everywhere. But for as long as there's been such a thing as popular music, two things have been true. Young people have been moved to express their big thoughts in music, and older generations have looked down on the works of the younger generation and said, yeah, that's nothing new. And what I think most people miss is how important that is. How necessary it is for each generation to come into their own, become aware of their own agency, look around at the world in its weird, arbitrary way that things are configured, and have big feelings about it all. And most importantly, hear those big feelings in a voice that sounds like their own. And using no other metric other than the overwhelming popularity of Blurryface, coupled with the fact that I was not able to talk to anyone under the age of 45 that didn't already know the song Stressed Out, I think it's safe to say that 21 Pilots is, at least in part, a voice that has become very important to the Zoomers, and maybe to some degree the Gen Alphas. Will 21 Pilots be relevant and listened to 100 years from now? Well, first of all, that's for future generations to decide, not us. But if I had to guess, probably not. There are lots of people who have topped the charts in the past that very few people remember now. Like, who of you watching this remembers Little Peggy March, or the Browns, or the Floaters, or Paul Hardcastle? But look, becoming an artistic touchstone which transcends time, that's not really the only function of music. Maybe not even the primary function. Because it's also a way to connect, validate, and empower those who are drawn to it. And in that capacity, music must reflect the voices of those who seek it, transient though they might be. Finally, my 5-word review of Blurryface by 21 Pilots is, my criticism ultimately doesn't matter. Now let's see what I'm listening to next. First roll for year. 2015. Okay, so we've had 57, 59, 16, and now 15. All right, next is for week and month. Second week of June. Dice, what are you trying to tell me? Okay, so second week of June 2015, and last will be for chart position 1 to 100. Number 25. And number 25, the Hot 100, second week of June 2015 is Girl Crush by Little Big Town. I know absolutely nothing about Little Big Town. I don't even think I've heard that name before. If I had to take a wild guess, I'd assume modern country, maybe? Anyway, Girl Crush appears on the album Painkiller, so that will be next week's album. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next week.